Right, and we back on the Main Event Podcast. I would appreciate if you guys take a look at the guests I got here today. I ran into this brother at the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, and he was on the red carpet, as he should have been, you know what I mean? And his name is Al Bernstein. I would love to break down everything he's done, but I'd be here for about 2-3 hours just describing everything this man's done in the history of the sport. So, ladies and gentlemen, to my left and to you guys' right, Mr. Al Bernstein.
Good to see you.
Thank you for coming on the Main Event Podcast.
It's nice to be here.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure.
Visit to your shop here.
The Barber Company, 7320 South Rainbow. After this, I'm going to start giving him his shaves before he get back on camera.
I just got a trim, but I'll come back.
You know I got you. You know I got you. But thank you for coming. I know you're a busy man, and I'm excited to have this conversation because I told you, I'm from Vegas, and boxing is in our culture. We don't have a lot of culture in Vegas, but here we got gambling and boxing. That's just what it is. So what I want to know is, how did you first get your start in boxing? What were some of your early aspirations that made you take this career path?
And boxing, it's interesting. Boxing kind of came in a very roundabout way. I boxed as an amateur in the south side of Chicago for a couple of years. And so I loved the sport, and I was a fan of the sport, but did not think boxing was going to be anything that would be a part of my overall. Well, in a sense, I did.
Right.
Because I became a newspaper man in Chicago. But for whatever reasons, when I got out of school, I couldn't get a job in sports. I got a job in hard news. No, I could not get a job in sports. So I worked for a newspaper chain. I moved up. I became managing editor of a chain of newspapers. But I was not loving what I was doing.
Right.
And so I freelanced a lot in sports and everything. And then I got a chance to write a book about boxing because I had, as I said, I'd been an amateur, and I was writing for Ring Magazine.
Okay.
I got a job as a stringer for them. And so I wrote this book. And then when ESPN came to Chicago, when ESPN started the Top Rank Boxing Series, and they had 4 stops, and one of their stops was in Chicago. So I clawed my way in. I told them, I knew the fighters in Chicago, which I did. They knew I was writing for Ring Magazine and everything, and I said, I did stuff for free, helped them, with the fighters and with everything. And then one show, they interviewed me on the show. And then they had a show where they had Sam Rosen and Tommy Hearns on there, and they wanted me to jump in to add some stuff. So I did. They liked what I did. And then they were looking for somebody to do shows, and I ended up doing all the shows in west of the Mississippi, Chicago, Las Vegas, for them. That was the beginning.
Dang. So when you started, I know you first started writing before you got into commentary. What was the big switch from writing to commentary? What light switch went off and made you go that direction?
My original goal in life was to be a sports writer, not in the cards.
Right.
And so I wanted to, and I did a lot of radio appearances in Chicago talking about boxing, and I did it kind of to get acclimated to it. And then when the ESPN thing kind of was thrust on me, that was kind of my goal at that point. I thought, you know what?
Right.
I wanted to get into broadcasting, and writing was a great foundation for it. And it really kind of helps you formulate the stories that you're gonna cover in the way you're gonna present them.
So did you, because I know you had to study when you were doing journalism, and I know you got to study when you do commentary. Did you learn anything from journalism that you carried over to commentary?
Yeah, quite
How was that?
Because my view, and this is the way I've kind of approached broadcasting, everybody has their own approaches. I view it as, even though some of broadcasting is, if you're an analyst especially, I do both play-by-play and analyst. I've been mostly an analyst, but some of it is opinion, hopefully a small amount.
Right.
Some of it is insight, and a lot is information.
Right.
And a lot is facts, and a lot is quoting and giving people the information that you've gained. So being a journalist helps you gather information, helps you codify information, put things in a form,
order. Okay.
who, what, when, where, why, and
Right.
you go down so for
That's a beautiful
broadcasting,
thing.
I haven't changed in 43 years. I go to ringside with all bullet points.
Bullet
Whether it
points.
used to be on paper and now it's on my computer. Right? Finally, you've been from a different generation. I'm
Right.
not unadaptable, right?
No, that's
I'm not
okay.
hopeless. So, and that's the way I do it. And I don't know if I would have done it that way if I hadn't had the journalistic background.
Right, because I know I've commentated a few fights before, none of your magnitude.
No, I
I'm
understand.
trying to get there, but I do know because I did bullet points as well.
Yeah.
But for me, I know a lot of time it's on the fly after you know your bullet points.
Right. Well, you are reacting to what's happening.
What's going on.
You have
Right.
to talk about it. The thing about the bullet points is it gives you the foundation, especially if you're doing play-by-play. If you're doing analysis, you still want facts. I mean, I've said this to fighters, so many fighters that have done analysis, because I did that. But when they come on there, when athletes come on, they're there because they fought and because they understand the sport and everything. But Andre Ward's a perfect example. Andre will be the first to tell you that he and I had many, many conversations when he was starting. And I talked to him about the bullet points, and I said, he is a huge believer in it. I think Andre does a great job.
No, he does. What up, Andre?
Yeah. And the reason I said that is because let's say there's a fight in front of you that is essentially similar, right? Round after round after round, not too much changes. You have to have something else to go to.
You do.
Or all you're doing is repeating yourself. So you have to either give people some other nugget about one of the fighters, or you have to talk about a trend. Maybe, let's say the fight is going the same way and one guy is constantly out jabbing him every round, and you happen to know from punch stats or whatever that the other guy normally out jabs some people.
Right.
Well, if that's one of your bullet points, you can tell the people that instead of just constantly repeating, "Oh, so and so's out jabbing him." You gotta
think of a new way to say something. Huh?
You have to add some new information to it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you got to. Okay, man. I'm learning so much. I'm taking notes as he's talking. A man in his stature. I appreciate that he's here. My next question for you is, after we discussed all that, what was your first big break of getting on TV?
Yeah. Well, the break was ESPN,
right,
where I got, they put me on these shows, and I started doing the half the shows. Then Randy Gordon, who was doing the other half, he was the other analyst. He had a kerfluffle where something happened and they didn't want him to continue. So then I did all the shows. And once I was doing all the ESPN shows, which was amazingly 47 a year. If you can imagine that.
How did you do that?
Good question. Well,
that's a lot of shows.
I was 30 years old.
Because keep in mind, there's only 52 weeks.
Only 52
in a year. So you did 47 shows.
Sometimes even.
It's a lot of shows. It's a lot of shows.
And it was amazing. Listen, I say this to the top ranked people. It's a top ranked boxing show. No one's ever. Well, even the USA Boxing Series, which was on at the same time, it was weekly. Right. They had different promoters. So. The only promoter that's ever done 47 or 48 shows a year is Top Rank.
Right.
And it was an huge undertaking for them. And being on that much was, even though ESPN at that time was not the ESPN of now, in the early 80s, it was more of a fledgling company, and not everyone got it.
Right.
But they were growing, and I grew with them. And then the big break was when, because we were even though I worked for ESPN, Top Rank was doing the series. In 1983, I was able to do the pay-per-view of Hagler Durant.
Wow!
And I was only 3 years into broadcasting. So
wow!
That was huge.
Was you nervous?
Yeah. That was because I'm thinking to myself, okay, want to make sure I don't mess this up.
Right.
And then 2 years later, I got to do Hagler Hearns. And I was starting to do all these major, because the ESPN series was great, but it was a cult kind of hit. You know,
Right,
it
right,
wasn't on. It was like being on network TV or whatever. But it was around the country, and it was, and I was starting to get a lot of more attention, and the show was getting attention. But doing the major pay-per-views kind of really gave me a chance to broaden my horizon a little bit.
Man, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. Now, my next question, this is what everybody gonna want to know right here on the Main Event Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe. Now, there's a few fights that you commentated.
Yeah.
And I want to run a couple of them down.
Go ahead.
Because I know you've seen so many matches, it's hard to say, tell me about all of them. But a few fights that I know you've seen, I got to ask you about because it was crazy. I got to ask you about the first time you seen Mike Tyson take that loss in Japan against Buster Douglas.
Well, the funny thing is I was at the night that happened, I didn't go to Japan. I was with ESPN, and I mostly went to cover big fights for SportsCenter. But in Japan, all they first of all, nobody thought Buster Douglas was going to win.
Right, that's what I was getting at. Right.
They sent one correspondent over there, just a news guy, not even a boxing, just to file reports, thinking that nothing would be of note.
Right.
I was singing, as you know, I do music.
Oh, we're going to talk about that too. We got to talk about that. Yeah, for sure.
I was in Atlantic City singing at a benefit. So at a Trump property, and I'm only bringing that up for a reason, for a Trump arena or whatever. And it was a private thing. So we do this, and then I go up into the room with the celebrities that we'd all performed, and we're going to watch the Trump fight. Now, all the Trump was at the fight, but all the people that were his executives were in there. And the next fight was going to be Michael Spinks and Mike Tyson at a Trump property in Atlantic City.
Okay.
So they're all like, come on, let's go watch him knock out Douglas, and man, we're so excited, we're going to have the next fight. And they're all happy, we go up there.
Oh, man.
And, the fight starts, right? And it's not quite going the way that everybody anticipated.
Not at all. Not at all.
Got one of the Trump guys, one of his vice presidents or whatever, walks over to me at one point. It's about round 5. He said, "Tyson's not going to lose, is he?" I said, "Well, he might.
He might.
Doesn't look good." I said, "But he might, And sure enough, of course, Buster Douglas was able to get the job done against him.
Shook the world up.
And Buster Douglas was a very talented fighter.
Right.
He wasn't the most self-disciplined human on the planet, which we saw in his next fight against Holyfield when he way too overweight and, he got knocked out by Holyfield. But Buster Douglas at his best was a very good fighter, and he showed it that night. And he was inspired by his mom, who had passed away.
Just passed away.
And he gave it the effort of his life.
He did against a hero that everybody thought Mike could never lose. All Mike got to do is put the gloves on, and that's it. But that lets you know on any given night, it can go either way.
And I think Tyson probably didn't take that fight as seriously as he should have. And he was starting to, at that point, not be as diligent about what he was doing. As he could have been.
To see that's crazy that we still talk about Mike, because the next fight I want to ask you about is the TheBite Fight.
Oh, the bite. Yeah. Also, I was
on
that one. I had signed to do this series on the ESPN, but it was a contracted by somebody else. It was called Boxino or something. It was down in Puerto Rico, I think, and it was a very good deal for me. I was very
you had to do it. Yeah,
it was a week-long thing, and the ESPN said, "Well, we need you to go cover." Well, it was funny. I didn't have to accept the assignment. They weren't happy that I wasn't going to.
Oh, wow.
But the thing was on their network, so they couldn't say, "No, you can't do it." So I went to do the other thing. And of course,
you missed the fight of a lifetime.
The rest is history. But I was there for the second Holyfield fight, covering it for SportsCenter when Holyfield came back to win. But yeah, that was insane, obviously, and one of the craziest things. Well, and I was there for Holyfield and Bo when the Fan Man came in. And I only reference that because it just shows you, and this is absolutely true, we keep thinking we've seen everything crazy that can happen in the sport of boxing.
And we haven't.
And we never have.
We never have.
Probably never will.
I mean,
Always going to be something different.
it's always going to be something crazy.
Yeah.
And that's another question I wanted to ask you as far as the sport of boxing. You've been covering it and commentating it for so long. How has the sport changed to you? Because you get a lot of people that go, oh, nowadays they ain't fighting nobody.
Yeah.
Or nowadays they're just picking and choosing to keep their, like, since you started, have you seen that shift where everybody's avoiding people?
There's, every decade brings something different, right? I mean, I came out in the 80s, which I'm not trying to be a nostalgic person. I think most people, even people, younger people, when they look at the situation, 1980s is probably the best decade for boxing ever. And I say ever because Gil Clancy, the great broadcaster and trainer, who was kind of a mentor to me, about 1983 or 84, I was only about 3 or 4 years into it. I was having breakfast with him. I was just, I'm thinking, having breakfast with Gil Clancy, the greatest guy ever, right? He was nice to me, my friend. So I said to him, I said, look, you've seen the 50s, 60s, 70s, you're in the 80s. I said, am I wrong that, because this is about 4 years in, am I wrong to feel like what we're viewing is special? He said, absolutely not. He said, what we have right now is the best I've ever seen. So the 80s it was a combination of a bunch of things. All these fights were on free TV, most of them, some pay-per-view, but most were on free TV. Fighters were great. Everybody fought each other for the most part.
Yeah.
Fighters fought more often. They all fought each other, and the sport was flourishing. The 90s, it continued like that into the mid part. Something changed. Fights were off free TV, and I went on. Mostly the main fights were either on HBO, Showtime, or pay-per-view.
Right.
There was some network, and ESPN still had boxing. That was more available, but those weren't the major fights. So that was a big shift in boxing because some of the fan base didn't have access to those fights. And in the late 90s, even though we had stars, to be honest, by the time we hit the end of the 90s, two things happened. Sometimes it was hard to make the matchups that we all wanted to see. That was the beginning of it.
Right.
The beginning of it. And I think fighters were starting to not fight quite as often.
Right.
Those were the two things that were starting to change in the late 90s. And the most important thing, the mainstream media stopped covering boxing. Stopped covering.
Why do you think that was?
Because they weren't seeing the fights. They were on a pay channel. Boxing shot itself in the foot so many times.
I can see that. I can see it.
Decisions, this, that. And even at ESPN, I was at ESPN until 2003 and 4. I couldn't get them to cover great fights. Wow. Here I was living in Las Vegas, and I said, "Oh, you don't even have to fly me, right?
Right, I'm already here."
Right. And there were fights I covered, but some they didn't even want to cover. So that was the beginning of what I feel was then into the 2000s, a really difficult time for boxing. I think around 2012 or something, boxing started to have a renaissance where the fights got better, and then networks came back into it a little bit, and we had a good spell where I think the sport had a bit of a renaissance. We are now at an inflection point for boxing. Showtime went away, HBO went away, Fox went away, with boxing on ESPN, DAZN, and the very limited Amazon, but not really Amazon because all they do is pay-per-views.
Right. Yeah,
so
they're just getting in.
Not even another. And so we have 2 of the 3 that are streaming. And listen, I think DAZN in particular has put on some very, very good fights.
Yeah, they have
been.
been.
It's a service that people have to pay for.
Yeah.
Now, some could say it's no different than Showtime or HBO, and it probably isn't. But there's one network left with ESPN. So the accessibility of boxing is a little bit less. So it may turn out okay, but it's different.
Right.
And you brought up the key element, and this is where it gets to be, it's a long diatribe.
No, it's okay.
Long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, we love it on the main event podcast. We good. You man.
We don't have any commercials to go to. So.
No commercial. Not yet. Not yet.
Well, you got.
I'll get the sponsors in a minute.
We do have the sponsors. We don't have to go to a break.
Not at all.
Fit them in.
We keep it all real.
So the thing is, this is the next big issue with boxing. It's become more difficult in recent years to get the fights we want to see. And fighters are fighting much less often. Now, we are lucky if a fighter fights twice a year.
True. The paychecks are bigger though now too. So
Well,
it's
and
probably
that is part of the problem as
right.
well.
Yeah, the paychecks are
We just
bigger.
saw a fight. If we're to believe everything we're told, we just saw, presumably, a fighter turned down $1.7 million to fight Boots Ennis. Turned down 1.7 to unify a title with somebody.
That's crazy.
Now, I don't know. Is that fighter ever going to make 1.7 million again? What and I'm not. Listen, it's so easy to put the onus on the fighters and blame fighters for things, and
Right.
and it's more than that. It's just that we're now at a point where, if people are only fighting twice a year, and we don't know if only one of those is going to be a super competitive, interesting fight, how does it help the brand? I don't know how it helps the brand of that fighter. It's almost like people are looking for that one cash cow thing, and then hoping that will lead to another one without. And part of the reason that happens is because we place such an onus on somebody losing.
Right.
That ends. That's the end of.
I think Floyd created that.
He did in a way. Yeah,
I think he did.
It was part of the Mayweather mystique. Now, he won, so you can't.
You can't deny.
He could have lost some of those fights. He fought some very tough people.
He did,
but he won, and he placed a premium on that, and so it became a little bit. Now, MMA has helped boxing shift that paradigm a little bit, because MMA, they don't. If you're in a great fight, you get another great fight.
Right. Exactly.
And to some degree, that's coming into boxing, but we're at a difficult point, because if you can't see your favorite boxer fight in fights you want to see, you're not a satisfied fan.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's not. Boxing has made good fights, and really, even in the last several years, I think for the most part, it's at a good product.
It is.
Fans
are upset though. They need to see it.
Now at an inflection point moving forward. I liken boxing to college football in a certain way, because college football is great a product as it is, and I love it. With the portal transfer that they're trying to figure out, the conferences going away, the rivalries going away, they're trying to figure out how to make sure that product carries it forward when the sports change so much.
That's true. Okay, I like the way you broke that down. That's why we gotta have the man here. I got so many questions to ask him, but now this I want to dive into more of your history. Just a few more questions. I know you're a busy man. You've seen a lot of fights. What are some of your biggest moments that you can recall commentating? Like, oh my God, I can't believe I commentated this fight.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe I had a front row seat to this.
Exactly.
What are some of those standout moments?
Yeah, it starts in 1985 with Hagler Hearns.
Okay.
I mean, I remember, and I've told this story before, I was sitting there at ringside, and also the broadcast team on that was Kurt Gowdy was the host, Al Michaels did play-by-play, and I was
Michaels,
there. So I was looking at it going like, okay, I'm here with Kurt Gowdy, who I grew up watching. Al Michaels, who was already becoming a star in network broadcasting. As in, I'm here 5 years into my broadcast career, sitting here at ringside for Hagler Hearns.
Wow.
How did this even happen? And I remember, it was so electric, and it was at that outdoor arena at Caesar's Palace where it was out in the park.
Old school Vegas boxing, baby.
Oh my God.
Old school Vegas.
And filled, of course.
Yeah.
And I remember when during the walk-in, after they had walked in and the crowd was just, I took my headphones off for a second. I said, I just want to hear this. I want to hear the organic sound of them. And that became something that I've always done. When it's just before the fight, I will take my headphones and listen.
That's good.
To hear how excited, what's the level of excitement here? What's the level of, I was amazed. I was there. And of course, the fight for 3.5 rounds was astonishing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, round one was one of the great rounds.
Cherry curl juice flying everywhere. They was they hated each other for a minute.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. For a minute, they hated each other.
Because in boxing, sometimes when you boxing, the fight break out.
And they had done a long press tour, and it wasn't the most. Yeah, they were under each other's skin at that point.
I can believe it.
And some of that may have contributed to Tommy Hearns being in a slugfest as opposed to boxing effectively, which he might have tried to do. Although I don't think his legs were stable that night. I've never. I mean, I love Tommy Hearns.
Hell of a fighter.
All of the Fort Kings. I mean, I did many of the Fort Kings.
Yes, sir, you did.
You know, I did that one. I did Hagler Duran. I did a lot of fights. I did several other Hagler fights. I hosted on the third Leonard Duran fight, which was in the Mirage. That, of course, wasn't super exciting, but I did a bunch of them with them. I did Barkley Duran or Barkley Hearns. I did Hearns Barkley, which was a great fight back in Atlantic City. So that fight was the Hagler Hearns was big. And that was one. Now, the best fight I've ever announced.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's hard to pick the best fight because I've done 4 billion, right?
4 billion. But yeah, how do you give us one out of 4? That's why I said, that's why I tried to make it easy and say, give us a couple.
I know.
You know, give us a couple.
And I say this knowing it might not be, but it feels like it was because not only was it exciting, it was fought at a high skill level. Jose Luis Castillo and Diego Corrales.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Most people think it might be the best lightweight fight of all time.
No, that was a fight right there.
And it was fought at such a high skill level.
Yeah.
And that was because Diego Corrales, and he had boxed really effectively in his previous fight. I think that was against Casamayor. He'd shown us boxing skills we didn't think he had. So everybody thought, oh, he's going to box against Castillo, you know, because he did it so well in the previous fight. He got in the trenches with Jose Luis Castillo.
Trenches.
And they went at it for 9.5 rounds. And not only was it a great action fight, then it had a dramatic ending. Corrales gets knocked down twice. It was in the 10th round, right?
Yep.
You think the fight's over.
I know I did as a fan.
Mouthpiece, so that's an extra point.
Yeah.
He's down twice. It's already a 10-7 round. He's never winning a decision at that point, probably.
Point, yeah.
So, and he might get knocked out in that round. He comes back to stop Castillo in that round.
I know it. That was a hell of a fight.
And if I'm going to say, you asked what are moments, I like to think that I had a moment in that fight that, and people sometimes talk about it or write about, where I've done plenty of things wrong over the last 43 years. This was one thing I did right. There was a sequence, and this is what I believe too about commentators not paying attention. They're so busy having a discussion about the fight, they're not paying attention to what's happening to it. It happens a lot. With that moment, when all that was going on after Corrales was knocked down a second time, Corrales landed a right hand that changed the dynamic. And I was able to point it out immediately and say, Castillo with a right hand that could change things. And it did.
Changed it.
Now,
like a pair of draws.
You know.
Changed it.
Because I was paying attention, I did. And so I'm proud of that because at least I helped the viewer, you know, with something. And sure enough, and it was amazing. But the whole story of that fight was astonishing.
Man, that's some good fights to be at, man. It's like you said, you did it for the fans and the fans enjoyed it. That's crazy to know. You had a job to do, but you still had to enjoy the fight.
And the other part about it is,
that's crazy.
This speaks to something else. We're all excited when we're watching boxing matches.
Right, yeah.
But broadcasters, while we do want to convey the excitement, we are not fans there, right?
Right.
And sometimes I think some broadcasters forget that, you know. We're not fans. We have to be on top of this and in a dispassionate way, but still with the excitement, but we have to help the fan,
right,
and not be one,
right,
even though we are one,
right,
and we want to enjoy and convey the excitement of it, but still be on point,
right, because it's a lot of times, man, for people that can't see, your words bring the fight to life for these people, and they do. Yeah, they do.
And you have to do just enough, not too much, because if you overpower a fight, I mean, I'm a big believer in that, and that's a big problem to me in broadcasting.
How do you overpower a fight? Like, what would be considered? Okay.
And that's shutting up once in a while.
I can dig it. I can dig it.
Not once in a while, stop talking, you know?
And let the fight play
out. It sounds, you know, I'm not trying to be, you know,
but
about it, but that helps because it gives us a chance as a viewer have a moment to digest what's going on.
What's going on? Now, with all that you have done, you've done millions of shows. Your legacy and your commentary. How would you love to be remembered?
For me,
Because you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
And you've been, like I said, for the people that can't see it, for people that got to listen to it on the radio and they hear your voice, it's like you paint it so pretty for them. What mark you want to leave on the game when you're done?
I hope that if there's anything that, people are going to say about me at any point during or after I'm done doing it, is just that I was fair. That's most important to me. And by the way, the one thing I am proudest about is that about 98% of the fighters who I've covered think I've been fair. Might be 1 or 2% that have a beef with me. It's a very small number.
Small beef.
And I think it's because, number one, I never attacked anyone personally, ever, or made comment. And number two, I think I'm fair about what they're doing. But I want to be fair. I want to be informational. And I want to make sure I have served the viewer.
Right.
That's the person I got to serve. So I hope that at the end of the day, even if people didn't dig what I did in a certain fight or in general, they could at least say that about me. And it's subjective. We all don't like the same things. So.
Right. Okay. Now, my last question before we wrap it up. I gotta know. Have to know. We talked about it earlier in an interview. You brought it up. It was one of my questions. The judges' decisions. Sometimes those can get crazy. Sometimes a lot of people be like, oh, what fight were they watching? Or, they can't be right. But, excuse me, judges do have a hard time. Not a hard time, but they got to see the fight as they see it. And you can't offset because you see it one way. Right. So have you ever been in a situation where you thought this fighter won and then the judges called it the other way? How was your reaction? Or how does that make you feel about the sport? Because I know decisions like that can put a damper on the sport.
That's a very nuanced question, even though it seems like a simple question, but it's not. It's a nuanced one because there are a couple elements to this. Number one, sometimes as an announcer, and I try not to do this, your visceral response to a really bad decision is such outrage. You try, and some people want you to show that outrage. Some people don't want you to show that outrage. Because they might say, who are you to be the judge? So what I think it's a fair statement, just as a fan, and see if you agree with this. When we see a fight that is a really close fight, and the judges are really close, and let's say it goes by a hair to the other guy, and we thought the other guy won, but man, it's razor thin. I don't think boxing fans feel like that's the worst thing that ever happened in the world, right? They say, okay, but when one judge is a big outlier, or when two of the judges are outliers, or when all three get it way wrong,
right,
then you can't ignore it. You have to address that it's controversial. You have to address all the issues about it, and you have to talk about it. And let me add one other thing to that.
Yeah, please do.
Referees' actions are oftentimes inexplicable in fights, and they either look like they are biased or incompetent. And I again, tough job to referee, tough job to judge.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's when fans, and I think it's also up to a boxing commentator to at least point out when referees act in ways that are controversial. You want to try and do it in a way that, where again, you're not the ultimate authority on anything, but you want to make it clear that something has happened because fans at home are feeling it. So why would you?
Yeah, exactly.
And that goes along with being fair. You can't. Let's say a referee. And that's another reason. To be honest, I don't go to dinner with boxing officials.
Right.
I like them. I know them. Mostly boxing promoters. Mostly, I am friends in boxing. A very select few that I'm friends with. I'm friendly with all of them.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want to be encumbered with that, and I don't want to attack them unfairly.
Right.
But it's my job to say
commentate,
if something is a little bit of
Right.
this.
Exactly. Now, that's why I just had to ask, because I know you've been around the sport for so long, so to soak up knowledge from you in this type of setting, man, has been beautiful.
It's tricky, and everybody has their own way of dealing with it. But it's one of the things in the sport that's difficult, right? Because it is a subjective thing in the scoring, and it's the one thing about boxing that makes it slightly different than other sports. Unless you're talking about, there are sports that are subjective in judging, like ice skating and gymnastics and other things, and those sports have their controversies as well. So.
Right. Okay. Now, before we wrap it up, this last question I got, because I got to go see this brother perform at the Tuscany, and he did a hell of a job. I didn't know he had vocals.
So nice.
I told you I was coming. I told you. Now, how long have you been singing, and how long has it been a passion, and how'd you land at the Tuscany?
Okay, two things. So you'll appreciate this.
Okay.
So, 1987, Hagler Leonard are going to fight. I'm having dinner with the president of Caesar's Palace and a couple other Caesar executives and some other people. And just before that, Barry McGuigan had fought Stevie Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
And Barry's dad was a pub singer in Ireland.
Okay.
And he came over and he did 3 nights in the Olympic Lounge which was a great lounge, great historic lounge over at Caesars. I don't know if you
I remember.
Yeah, you know all of it. You're probably a little young.
I was, but I remember the name. I remember the name.
You couldn't go there.
No. I had family that would go there and hang out. Yeah.
It was the greatest place. And he did 3 nights leading up to that fight.
Mm-hmm.
So that they had to see, and I had been out here, and I used to sit in and perform with music people when I came out here to Vegas and everything. And the Caesars guy said, "Don't you sing?" And I said, "Yeah, I sit in and I enjoy doing it." He goes like this. He said, "You got to do 3 nights leading up, just like Danny's or Barry's father did. You got to do 3 nights at Caesar's Palace at the lounge leading up to Hagler Leonard."
Wow.
Now, I didn't have a full act. I didn't have a band.
You put it together.
I didn't have anything. 3 months later, I'm on the stage. So I got with people I knew in entertainment here. I said, we got to, and I'm living in Chicago. So I come out here and I rehearse, and I take these tapes back with me to Chicago, and I'm rehearsing every day. And I come out here a week before the fight and lock myself into a studio where we're recording. I'm getting millions of calls from radio shows that want me to be on. They can't even find me. I'm like,
You're working.
I'm trying. I was like, I'm going to excuse myself. So get on the stage at Caesar's Palace, and you want to talk about daunting. I'm up there. I'd never performed in Vegas before. And I'm looking out at the audience. This is 3 nights before, Hagler Leonard, and the town is a buzz, right?
Right. Vegas is on fire fight nights.
Now, I look into the audience. Here's all the boxing. Here's Tommy Hearns. Here's Roberto Duran over here with this group. Here's Rodney Dangerfield over here. Here's Michael Landon, who was in town for some of it. I'm looking through this audience, and I'm like, everyone, I'm like, holy cow, I'm up here doing this in front of all these people. It's like, all these people are here. I'm like, shit, John Madden's over here. I'm like, okay.
Were you more nervous singing or commentating?
Singing. Way more. So, and that was the first time. So now I'm doing the show, and about 3 songs in, it's going well, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is great, and I'm like, okay, and we did the 3 nights, and it worked out real well, and that was the beginning of it. And then I would do, over the course of time, I did that before about 5 or 6 of the big fights. And then I started doing this show called The Sports Party, where I would do some music. I had tracks, because it was hard to have a band that was, for me, because I was sportscasting, so I wasn't keeping them working. So I would use the tracks, and I would sing some specialty songs. Like, were you there when I did the ESPN Blues? Or
no,
yeah,
I got there when you was doing Georgia on My Mind.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I used to do these specialty songs.
He killed it, matter of fact. Georgia on My Mind, he killed it.
Oh, thank you. I love singing that song.
Oh, you killed it. I love that song. You killed it. The band behind you was good.
Right?
If you don't love Georgia on My Mind, something's wrong with you. That's a classic.
And of course, there's the only version that matters, and that's Ray Charles. But then hundreds of people have sung it well.
Yes.
So
and you do too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That's very nice. You can appreciate it on all those levels.
For sure.
Because it's the greatest song. But anyway, so then I did that show. And then about 7, I did that for a long time, the sports party. I would do it here in Vegas. I'd do it at riverboat casinos around the country. And we did trivia and prizes. I don't know if I did any trivia the night you were there.
No, I don't think you did.
Yeah, we did sports trivia and stuff. Okay, so then and I got out of music for a little while. I just wasn't, it was too hard. And I've had just a lot of things made it where I couldn't really connect with it. And I was missing that.
Right.
And the weird part about it is, for a long time, the other passion in my life is riding horses, which probably most people don't know. I used to be in celebrity team penning competition and stuff.
Okay.
I stopped doing that because I had to put my horses down. And I was missing something in my life. You know, we all have to have something in our life.
Yeah, for sure.
Passion. And I said, I got to get back to music. And I went to the Tuscany one night. Kenny Davidson, the guy who played for me, when you saw him, and plays in Tuscany all the time. And I sat in he has a show on Friday night where they have all guest singers that they invite. But he knew, he knew me from TV, and he said, somebody told him I sing, so he took a flyer, he let me sing. And knowing Kenny changed me, and I started saying, okay, I got to get back into music. And then I got to know the people at the Tuscany. I love that room.
It's a nice room. Nice ambiance, too.
Show, sir.
You guys got to go catch him down there. What days you down there? Let him know.
Well, we do it before big fights, so I don't have another one planned, but I will in the next month or two.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll be sure to let y'all know.
Yeah, keep them posted, and we'll get you back out there. And
I'm coming. I'm bringing my wife with me this time.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Al Bernstein. I appreciate him coming through. You are royalty in here. Tell him whatever you want.
About that,
Tell him.
I'm starting my own YouTube show.
Okay.
It's actually starting this week on the Salida Promotions YouTube channel.
Okay.
So they can go to that on YouTube, Salida Promotions, and I've got, I'm starting a weekly show, so people can come over there and check it out.
I'll put all your links and stuff up. If you need a partner for the show, I'll come help you.
Man.
I'm real good at this. I'm telling you.
We get there for a while.
You let me know. I drive down there. So he's in Arizona, right?
Well, no, we do.
He's in Cali?
I do it right from now. We could do it on Zoom.
Oh, Zoom. Oh, okay. Right.
So,
oh, man.
I'm going to get you to partner with me a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have a blast. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Main Event Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe. I had a great time with Mr. Al Bernstein. Boxing commentary greatness at its finest. And we are out. Peace.
That was good.
Thank you, Al. That was so fun.